It's May 2nd, 2023. I'm just trying, along with other things, I'm trying to figure out. I feel like I was in this room with these mirrors and this house on a hill in the woods, in a whaling town, um, in my youth. And I just feel as though there were so many things that I was not um, almost like a confined space, even though it gave the illusion of having some freedom. Um, and then, but it feels almost as though the world or the universe blitzed, for lack of a better term, to use a Brady Bunch term for his area of expertise, almost like there was some blitz going on and the world built itself out so fast and in such that I just got, I feel like I just got lost. And I'm now sitting and thinking in my 44th year, I'm like, okay, so realistically, there were people born same time as I was in 77, 78. They went through some classroom education. They got on some career path. They got some way to support themselves. They did whatever they do at humans and earthlings. So I'm like, but my journey has been so different at unexplained phenomenon. Um, and so I'm looking for clues and I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, all right, realistically, there's something called a 100-year plan that planning and management and emergency services goes off of as at like a base level in logistics and just makes sense. And then what's this phenomenon of this media that they're doing in the local area? And then they added in not just TV, but then they added in movies, and it's no longer specialty items. Like, I mean, it's now so bloated and saturated, it's even further confusing. And sitting at this level and being in the position that I'm in, which is nowhere, um, I'm looking for the clues and the signs that that's on the schedule. And then today they put on that there's something called the Writers Guild of America. Never even heard of them. And they've got something going on. They were going on strike. Apparently they went on strike in 2007. It's been like 15 years. I didn't know. Um and they affect the late night television first, it says. And then so I'm listening to that. And then I'm looking in my real footpath. The Queen's Library is throwing out there this Spanish daughter. And at the same time, Mayor Adams is getting shipments of, for lack of a better, it looks like conquistadors. Like, I don't, going in the theme of, again, like, I watched The Rock from 1996. They aired it again tonight. And at the end, it says, in loving memory of Don Simpson. Now, I didn't know what a Don was until all of a sudden I read this. And then I'm like, oh, they go off the DON system. I'm on a GOD system. What's this DON? So apparently it's something very important here. I had no way of knowing. Um, and then it's it's just I'm watching these pieces, and it's like they had to have known before. There was some schedule, some anticipation of this. It's so frustrating trying to pick up the pieces like just after the bombardment of, and in The Rock it throws this hypothetical or theoretical that there's something called a USMC that I had never heard of. And then there's something called Navy SEALs. I heard of them. And but there's this hypothetical fight in this in loving memory of Don Simpson where they're going after one another in this gigantic battle at this Alcatraz, and I'm like, no, that's very curious. And then it just so happens that at Queen's Library, they're putting out there that I should try to follow along with something like from Ecuador and Colombia. I'm like, and then I'm watching what's coming through the border, and I'm like, well, okay, so some part of communication seems to be working, but you have to know where to look. And there's nobody here. Like, there's no, I mean, it's just, it feels like an all out assault, honestly. Um, so this is what it looks like from my 44th year with no humans or, I don't know. And then they throw out there that this Teflon Don. I mean, like again, there was a TMNT of Donatello. That much I know. My cousin used to tell me about them when I would go visit. But there's this other Don system I did not know about.
Here's television and movie writers are going on strike, which means that writers might have to do something totally against their nature. Go outside.
Wait, are they talking about go outside their storyline? Because again, for answers, I know they. I mean, like I would assume they stick to their script. They run in tight circles because they don't want to be fired or threatened.
These are our writers. These people, these are our writers, and I'll stick myself in there because I'm WGA2, and they're so important to our show. They write the monologue, the meanwhile, the cold open, and without these people, this show would be called The Late Show with a guy rambling about the Lord of the Rings and boats for an hour.
Now, see, on that note, this brought up for me when he brought this up. The Late Show, a guy rambling about Lord of the Rings and boats for an hour. I'm like, right, okay, so that goes back to this in loving memory of Don Simpson with something called a USMC is fighting with something called a Navy SEAL, which is waterbound. And I'm like, Lord of the Rings and boats for an hour. That's a really interesting way to put it. And then I'm going to flash forward to what the mayor in New York City is speaking about, because it's really interesting that he's got sword and cap on, and then it goes to what's being shipped or bust into New York and how the mayor is actually handling this from Mayor Abbott, who's upset about some Democratic sanctuary. Not sure what that's about, but I'm going to pause this for a second. Here's what this says. This was Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
Maintains the governor's actions are a political ploy. If you want to go to any other city, you have to pay. But if you want to go to New York, we will send you there for free. And so there was a clear target on these cities.
Adams also says Abbott is using the crisis as a way to hurt Black-run cities.
108,000 cities in New York. 108,000. Governor Abbott sent asylum seekers to New York, Black mayor, to Washington, Black mayor, to Houston, Black mayor, to Los Angeles, Black mayor, to Denver, Black mayor. He passed over thousands of cities to land here.
More than 57,000 asylum seekers have come.
Is that like a muster or a roll call? I mean, I've been watching some of the movies trying to catch up on like, all right, so like character portrait, Ed Harris was USMC, theoretically. And then on the opposite of that was this other person who I have a different name of in an unexplained aerial phenomenon. With a different type of clock system or no clocks at all.
Caused the city's shelter system to burst at its seams. And with no solution in sight, Adams says it'll be New Yorkers who will ultimately be left with the bill.
State and federal aid will cover just under 40% of our costs, leaving New Yorkers to pay the rest.
Mayor Eric Adams says he agrees the burden should not fall on certain states or cities. He says this is a national issue. But that being said,
But what nation is the question? All of these things are not being taught in the schools. I mean, to even watch the news, you have to have some degree of certainty. And but I don't know who's working the newsroom. And then there's these late night specialties. They're upset because they call it linear. And then all of a sudden they went to some streaming service. Why didn't they just stay linear with dedicated advertisers? And I mean, like, again, that goes back to the Monopoly days, but it was a slow progression. I mean, it just seemed like it would be an easier way for the justice system to handle the case and the workload of chasing down the problems that exist within the system. I don't understand why. I don't understand why that was changed. I also read the synopsis on what the library put out there. And again, I'm trying to go Queens Public Library. So is public service in charge of that calendar? And then if there's multiple competing navies, is that one solid USMC, or are they broken down into like divisions and companies? Like, I don't know how that works. Then they throw a 4-letter word out there called an army. Nobody explains who they are. I mean, like, there's not even like basic for the kids growing up here. If these things exist, which clearly they do, not only in movie, but I mean, I've seen what's in the movies walking on the streets in fatigues. Rarely, but it's happened. So I know that they exist, but like, there's not even a consciousness for the moms who have sons. I mean, there's not even a conversation open as to who are they and what does opportunity look like for the children. Or if that's not the career path, what else is available or what's going to be available? Or is that the only option? I mean, it wasn't even something that was offered. Um, so this gets awfully confusing. But I'm trying to, they had on there Don Simpson. Um, I know I think that's, I looked it up on Google to see what my version of Google says it's in reference to. And then I'm just trying to balance out some new vocabulary. And it's a space, it says Paris Chiquito between Ecuador and Colombia on the Andes Mountain. I'm like, oh, how symbolic at like Raggedy Ann and Andy. I mean, these were real field things growing up here that somebody put out there. Um, and as far as Anna and Andy go, they were in charge of the Met Opera in New York City. Or no, the Met Gala, which I just learned about. CBS did a piece on it yesterday. I found it fascinating. I sat here and I looked at, I mean, again, it's a different type of art, but it's like, for me, it's just like looking at a bunch of paintings, but it's in a 3D different art form, and just fascinated by the textures, and then of course the stories behind them. I was listening to a small piece that they did. Never heard of this particular Anna or that particular Andy before, but that's how they introduced them on the show. So I use the name very respectfully. I don't know what the pronoun is or the word they use to address them. I don't know what their last names are. Um, but it seemed that they are at the top of their field in New York, in like a respectful way. And she puts on this red carpet. They had on something called a Doja Cat, and I'm like, Doja. Oh, the first three letters of that are still DOJ. That's interesting. At the dawn. Um, and I'm like, I still have a letter from GOD. I mean, that doesn't go away, so that's interesting. Again, I don't want to get in trouble with the American Lung Association, because I don't have any idea what kind of fights are just seething underneath the surface in New York City at any and all possibilities of time. Um, oh, and also Vin, uh, Vinci's, it has in here as well. I'm reading up again. St. Vincent's was some, is whatever the last St. John's by the Crescent Street. St. Vincent's was what the alumni newsletter says that they follow. But then in here I read that there's something about Vince's, and I'm just like, again, is this just divine inspiration that follows the cosmology and like the magic and the mystique of this area? I mean, it seems like divine sorcery, really it does. But I've been hurt by divine crime, so I don't know how to correct that indiscretion, I suppose. I mean, like, I don't even know what to call it at this point, other than the two meeting places of things that were not on my schedule, but somebody else weaved them in some crafty way. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Getters, it's Earth, solar system, Milky Way universe, galaxies broken. And it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.